everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening to celebrate the 50-year anniversary of Huntington Central Library. I'd like to welcome all of you to this wonderful event. And before we get started, I wanted to ask that all of you please check your phones, make sure that they are on silent or vibrate. I see everyone reaching into their pockets, so I'm glad I reminded everyone. And I also wanted to take a few minutes to recognize some people here in the room. So first, I'd like to start off with our wonderful employees of the City of Huntington Beach Public Library, and also current and former employees. So if you all could just raise your hands, that would be wonderful. And then also, if you're a volunteer of either the library or of our wonderful Central Park or any of our parks, I'd love for you to raise your hands as well. And then moving into our city dignitaries, joining us this evening is Travis Hopkins, our city manager. And from our Community and Library Services Commission, we have Lolly McCarty, our chair. And Jeannie Paris, one of our commissioners. And for a quick presentation, I'd like to invite up Mayor Pat Burns, Councilwoman Vandermark, and Councilman Twining for a quick proclamation for Kathie Schey.
It's actually for the library itself. We have one that will present to Ashley right now, real quick, for the library itself. And Kathie Schey, can you please come out? Kathie Schey, in the house. I know you're there. Why are you hiding?
Ken, that's you. I'm sorry, in the closet.
We have a commendation for you for all your work.
Oh my gosh.
Not only that you do for the library, but you do for the city and everything else. We greatly appreciate it.
Oh my God, that is so sweet and beyond kind. Thank you so much.
Oh no, it's well earned.
There's more. Oh my gosh, thank you.
It's well earned, believe me.
Wow.
And we just want to welcome you guys, 50th anniversary. It's awesome. Despite the latest things that have happened in the city, the council very much supports and looks forward to the library proceeding, hopefully for another 50 years.
And next, I'd like to invite Marissa Rodriguez, our library manager, to share a few words.
Hello, everyone. It is such a privilege to work in this beautiful library and provide services to the entire community. It's so wonderful to see so many community members that I see in the library, current and former employees here tonight, volunteers as well. So thank you all for the part that you play in making this our library as well. I would like to introduce Kathie Schey with a little bit about her bio. So Kathie Schey holds a master's degree in history, for which she won the Nicholas Perkins Hardeman Prize for Outstanding Achievements by a Graduate Student. Her numerous subsequent awards include the Ebel Heimberger Scholarship for Excellence in California History and Visiting Research Fellowships from the University of Michigan and the Vermont State Historical Society. Kathie regularly speaks at conferences across the U.S., and locally as well, researches and scripts city programming and consults for major media on historic projects. For the past 17 years, she has served our city through the Historic Resources Board and later the Design Review Board, many times as chair of both. In 2019, she was unanimously appointed as our city archivist, and again in 2023 for an additional 4-year term. She holds certifications from the Society of American Archivists, who has published her work by invitation, and the National Association of Government Archivists and Record Administrators, for which she serves on 2 national subcommittees. Her work has been formally recognized by the National Council for Public History. She has also received the Mayor's Making a Difference Award and later a City Council commendation for a film documenting our long history of women mayors. She also holds certifications in urban planning, port city development, and preservation leadership, and is qualified under federal law to evaluate historic properties. Kathie has 1 husband, 2 sons, 3 grandsons, and a Bernese mountain dog. With that, Kathie Schey.
Thank you all so much for coming and spending your evening with us. And I know that it means that you love the library as much as I do, and as many of us do. It's a fabulous place. And in terms of the history of the city, this library and our parks and playgrounds really top the list of things that I am most caring about and involved with. I'm not the greatest with fancy graphics. I'm a humble historian, which means I am very nosy, always sticking my nose into whatever box I can find, reading dead people's love letters, all that kind of thing. But I'll do my best. So they've given me a clicker. I'm proceeding to click. It's kind of helpful, I think, to, as we celebrate 50 years of this library, to really think about where we came from. And it happens that before we were a city, in the early 1907, 1908 era, we were getting these things in the mail. And they were traveling boxes of books that were sent to rural communities. We had less than 900 people in all the environs that turned into Huntington Beach today. And they would send you a box of books that they picked out for you. So boxes of books that we might get would be things maybe on agriculture or business. Certainly lots of good books on religion. Very few would have been children's books because those were the purview of parents or the schools. So you didn't send a lot of children's books. But there would be things on, ancient Rome, things like that. All these kinds of things that would better your mind. Our particular box was a 3-shelver. If you're really tiny, you got a 1-shelver, like that one over there. And it got delivered to Matthew Helm's Furniture Store. That store is still standing. It's on the National Register of Historic Places, and it is still owned by descendants of the family today, so it's a pretty cool place. Everybody would go over to Matthew Helm's Furniture Store, check out the books, and when we'd all had our fun with them and done all we could, they'd get packed up, and we had to pay to send them to the next town on the route, which, of course, we happily did. Matthew Helm also was elected to serve on our very first city council, which was then called the Board of Trustees. We moved along pretty quickly, and a group of people in our community by 1908 had really said, this box of books thing, it's good as far as it goes, but we really need to do more. So they got together. There was Louis Blodgett, who was our attorney, and there was a lady who was part of the women's club. And they said, we've got to do something. So they really worked to organize a library alliance, if you will. And it was culled from all walks of life in our city. There were 9 members, ranging from a banker, the principal of the grammar school, to the blacksmith's wife, and another lady who was the wife of C.D. Hartwell, whose giant claim to fame, in addition to being a Huntington Beach pioneer, was he grew tomatoes of such notoriety Papers Back East wrote about them. And so they got together and decided they had to raise money to do something. And so they did. They scavenged money any way they could, and they were very, very determined that they didn't want to get just a few rich people involved. They would rather have small sums from many than large sums from a few. They really wanted to make sure that everybody in the community knew this library belonged to everyone. And so, well, I'm afraid to say anything else now. So they worked at this. They had all kinds of fun things. So one of the things they did was they had a public performance, and they all sang the Star Spangled Banner. They had Lohengrin's Wedding March and a tiny tot parade, all kinds of goofy stuff. But they managed to raise enough money to buy that wretched building that you see there, haul it onto the site, and it became our very first library. There's lots of stories about it having been a restaurant in its previous life, but there's a lot more information and documentation. This actually was an old business. By the time we got it and hauled it to our site, it didn't have a roof. It was barely hanging on together. And so they went out into the community and they said, hey, if anybody can give us anything, do you have a book? Do you have a rug? Do you have a piece of furniture? What can you give us? So they raised a way to put a roof on the thing, and they managed to put books on the shelves. And we don't know who donated what, but you can see they came through in a pretty good style. It didn't take very long. They raised $300 above and beyond that, and now had some books. And so they donated it to, by then, the city. 1909, we were a city. And they donated it to the city, along with their $300 fund. And what's really fascinating is the city, when they enacted one of their very first original laws about income taxes here in the city, taxes were $1 for an adult for the year. And that was 85 cents to run the city and 15 cents to run the library. So you can tell it was a pretty important institution in the city. It didn't last very long before somebody caught wind of this fellow named Andrew Carnegie, who was from Scotland, a very famous industrialist. I'm sure everybody in this room has heard of him. And he was rather different. He had a lot of bad things about him that he did that were sort of scary, but he really had a wonderful thing, and that was that he really believed that all of these wealthier, older men, all these men that he had struggled to learn from, had opened their libraries, their private libraries to him, and he'd been allowed to read all these wonderful things, and he really credited that with his success as an industrialist, his success at dragging himself from his bootstraps up from being, you know, a kid digging in the streets and selling newspapers to being who he was. And so he decided to give back to the people of our country by building these libraries. So you had to apply for one, you had to prove you had land, and you had to communicate with the foundation, the Carnegie Foundation. And we did that. It wasn't always easy. We have lots of letters like this one where the foundation wrote back and said, you know, we can't really approve these drawings because, you know, the 4 built-in umbrella stands seems a bit much. And these were, you know, oak, right, built into the wall. And they really had a hard time for some reason with the 5 sets of stairs into the basement. Why we needed 5 sets of stairs into the basement, I don't know. We wound up with 2, and that was great. And then for some reason we elected or hired an architect from Los Angeles called E.L. Hopkins, whose big claim to fame was building buildings in the California coastal style. I don't know about you, but that looks like a Carnegie library. They all look a lot alike, and there's nothing California coastal about that, right? But build it they did. It opened for us in 1913, and it stayed in business until Main Street was opened in 1951. And there you go. I've got a couple of pictures here about Main Street for a couple of reasons. One is it's still here. It hasn't gone away like the Carnegie that was finally burned to get rid of it. Nobody wanted to buy it by the fire department as a training exercise years ago. But the other reason I kind of want to talk about this is it was also, like our library today, made of concrete in sometimes an experimental way. And our library on Main Street was made for what they call tilt-top precast construction, which meant that all the forms, all the walls were made of concrete, and they were cast in all those little areas you see that say F. That was a molding area. That means frame. So they would cast a wall, and then they would tilt it up wherever it was going to go. And that's how they built the library. We opened it, dedicated it there in 1951. And there's what it looked like at that time, and this is the inside at that time. And of course, we love the suit and the tie and all of that. Interesting enough, a whole lot of that furniture you see in the background, we still have. We've gone in, I sat on it, I looked at it. This stuff lasts forever. It's that 1950s blonde sort of plastic strange furniture that, you know, many of us remember our moms having, and it's still there. But then, of course, we realized pretty quickly, you know, in the 1960s, early 70s, Huntington Beach was declared one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing city in the United States, which was pretty massive. We were going just by leaps and bounds, and it was just very, very obvious that that one little library was not only going to be insufficient, but that we needed massive more park space. And a lot of people agreed with it. Really wanted to get it done. They had a bonds committee that actually had an election to raise money for this, and it did pass, but not by a large enough majority that was required by law. So a group of people got together, and they created this wonderful group. And one of our members, Charlene, Mrs. Bauer, I know is here. There she is, right there. And she was one of the people that was absolutely at the forefront of this. And this is a picture that we have, and many of those people, of course, that were longtime public servants of our city are now gone. We have Dr. Thomas Cooper, who was not only an educator, but he introduced an awful lot of our flashback programs and supported that. We have the father of our modern Parks and Rec, Mr. Worthy, is in the middle. Moving over, we have Dr. Ralph Bauer, who went on, of course, to become mayor. And hence Charlene Bauer. So these were really incredible people and did a really incredible job for us. And what they did was they made sure that we got Central Park. And then we got this library site within Central Park. It was quite an amazing feat, and if you could turn back time and visit the Central Park as it then was, you'd be absolutely shocked. We had a really bedraggled redwood water tower that they thought would be a really cool lookout tower. But, you know, of course, it swayed in the breeze. So I don't know how great that would have been. We had a mushroom farm. That smelled just lovely. We had a couple of quarries that filled up with mud. We actually turned one of those into our adventure playground, where hundreds of kids every year lost their shoes in the mud. And my personal favorite is the target range. That was where we had the police target range. It was also open to the public. And the great mental picture I have of all of these people out there walking every inch of it, looking for unspent rounds to dig up. So you think about that, you think about the park we have today. And of course, it was also home to those encyclopedia lots, little teeny lots people got with an encyclopedia. And when the city came to buy them, of course, some people said, oh, that's worth something? Now mine's actually I'm going to get some money out of it. And of course, a lot of others, they couldn't find out who actually owned them. So a lot of them became part of the city by eminent domain. And we actually, in the city archives, have maps of these things. These little, we know exactly where they were, you know. So if you bought the encyclopedia and you had number 22, that's your spot. So then, of course, we decided we're going to move forward with this library. We had 10 acres of land set aside for it. Okay, who's going to build this thing? How's it going to happen? And they reach out, they send out bids. They send out 57 bids, get returned. People respond to 57 of them. And there were some really, really heavy hitters in that crowd. These are four, I know I've got some Archie nerds in the audience like me, so I picked these four to talk about out of the 57 that we received. The first, of course, Victor Gruen Associates. He did a lot of early bluff-top community areas that the city never built, but they asked him to design. Here within our city, he was responsible for the really critical traffic analysis that was required before they could install Douglas aircraft, which was, of course, seminal to the growth of our city. And it was a big deal getting that many people on and off roads to come to work here. So it was really important. Today, most of you would know his work if you were to shop at South Coast Plaza. Victor Gruen designed that, and sort of his firm is now the godfather of these incredible shopping plazas. Kurt Meyer is less of a heavy hitter, although he did win some distinction, mostly because the buildings that he built were pretty much wrapped around a purpose. They weren't terribly imaginative. You need a bank, here's a bank, right? You know, you need whatever, an office building, here you go. You got a front door, back door, and 5 windows, and a restroom. You know, very, very simple. But I did want to bring him up because he did win some awards, plus he is the architect for our city hall. So if you're down at our city complex, that's Kurt Meyer design. Okay, except for the diagonal beams you might see, those were added for earthquake safety many years later. William Pereira and Associates. There's a name that I think even people that aren't really into architecture really know. Appears on the cover of Time magazine. He was considered the original planner of the city of Irvine. Did all kinds of famous works. I'll let you Google him because we could do another hour just on Pereira. And then the guy at the bottom was really intriguing. Robert Alexander and Associates, because for many, many years he had been Richard Neutra's partner. And they together built all kinds of buildings literally across the globe. Finally decided to go their separate ways. Richard Neutra was not always the easiest person to deal with, I'm told, and so that may have led to it. But at the end of the day, they selected Richard Neutra. And we used to wonder why, right? We never could figure out why. And we finally found a letter, actually, that the Neutras wrote back to us saying, gee, thank you so much for the commission. We're so excited we're going to build your library. Can you tell us why we were picked? So really, we didn't know, and neither did they. Recently, I found a small report where a person from the library board said, we're picking them because they've designed libraries before, and he's world famous. That was it. Like the other guys weren't, right? You know, but there was Richard Neutra. Kind of an interesting character. People talk about him as being a bit of a curmudgeon, and he really was. He came from Vienna, Austria, after serving in the First World War. And he studied under Frank Lloyd Wright, a name I know that most of you remember. And Frank Lloyd Wright had a very specific design aesthetic where he built buildings that were really worked with their surroundings, right? They worked, they weren't jarring, they belonged there. So if you looked at things like Falling Waters and some of his other houses, you can really see that, right? And the interior is very distinctive too, similarly. I mean, they're just a very cohesive thing. So Neutra studied with him for a while and was so thrilled with Frank Lloyd Wright, he actually named his firstborn child, Frank Lloyd Neutra. It turns out, interesting enough, in the years afterwards, that it turns out Frank Lloyd Wright didn't really like him very much. And he said they only put up with him because everybody liked Neutra's wife. She was a concert pianist, a concert violin player, and she was just a lovely, lovely person. She was also named Dion, same name as the third son. Now, one of the things that we see here at the library very clearly is this heritage that Neutra himself created, in which he took the ideas that Frank Lloyd Wright had about being part of nature and taking it one step further. And he comes up with this idea, survival through design. And he says, you know, the very survival of man is dependent on us making man-made structures that are okay to be in, right? We can't like build ourselves prisons with no windows and no air. We have to build ourselves, you know, things that make sense. And he coined the term biorealism. And here it is. The inherent and inseparable relationship between man and nature. Today, his memory serves on in the Neutra Institute for Survival Through Design, run by his son, retired epidemiologist Dr. Raymond Neutra. So you can go to them and learn a whole lot more about his design aesthetic. Interestingly enough, when they said, well, he's designed some libraries, he designed two. He designed one in Adelphi College, and they were so thrilled with this, they gave him an honorary doctorate. And they gave it to him at a graduation ceremony that 25,000 people attended. He often kind of spelled that out, like they all came to see him. They actually didn't. They came to see all the other graduates in the college. But he was quite well liked, and they actually put out a big magazine, and I think I have that on one of the tables for you to see tonight in C&D. But he also had another library he designed, Simpson College in Iowa. And I love this library that we have in our files. And they're saying, I want to congratulate you, but also give you my sympathies on having hired Richard Neutra. Basically, he was cranky. He was unwilling to sort of learn about how libraries worked. And he did things like he created a 45-foot-long reference table. Now, any of you who have ever gone to a reference table, or worse yet, been a librarian behind one, a 45-foot table, okay? He also somehow managed to get all the electricity all wired together. So if something went off on one floor, the whole place went dark. And last but not least, he paid no attention to acoustics, something that his son Dion here in our library paid a great deal of attention to. So you could whisper in one corner of the Simpson College library, and everybody could hear you everywhere. So it was really considered just a mess. So that was... He's famous world over, and he's built two libraries. So they did get the contract for this, and a little over a week before the contract was due to be signed, Richard Neutra died. And there was great speculation about what's going to happen. You know, we got, the firm itself was a large firm. It had about 70 architects working for it. But really, the new head of the whole thing was Richard's youngest son, Dion Neutra, who'd gone to USC and basically worked for his father every single day. What that meant was he knew how to do things his father's way, and he was very stoic about that. So if his father said, this is a really good thing, after he died, Dion said, this is going to be the best thing I've ever done, using that idea. And we really see the benefit of that in this library, I think. When you look around and you see this relationship we have inside and outside with nature, we have plants inside, there's plants outside, there's water inside, there's water outside, right? And all of these things, these big, soaring spaces and fresh air, and areas that Dion called human spaces. All the books would be in the middle of the library, and then you could take a book and go be outside of those stacks, which really are suffocating places, right? Nobody wants to be down there buried in books. You want to get your book and you want to go out where you can see water and you can read your book, and it's a pleasant human space. So they did give the contract to Dion, and he ran with it. We have a lot of discussion in the architecture community about who really designed this building. Was it Richard and Dion just followed through with his designs? Or did Richard really leave comparatively little, and this building really owes its design legacy to Dion Neutra? And the answer, I think, is really found in the brochure for the dedication of Central Park, which has one picture of the library in it, and it's this picture. We have a copy of this that you can look at afterwards and see for yourself. But if you look at the picture, what you really see is some semblance of what the library came to be, right? You see different levels, you see sort of a square shape, and you see a whole lot of panel walls that I think were more representational of sides than they were panels. We don't have those kinds of solid panels here. So really, I think more and more of us are really leaning to the fact that Richard died with a vision. Dion designed a library. He didn't do it all by himself. He had the help of this handsome gentleman. This is Walter Johnson. Walter Johnson had been our librarian for many years by this point, and he was known for a lot of things. Smart man, Army veteran. He came to us from, I believe, the Douglas Archives, I think Sue's there, yep. So he came to us from that. He came with a really huge interest in art. Oh my gosh, he loved art. He loved culture. He loved all these things. And the great thing about Walter Johnson is that if he didn't exist, this library wouldn't be what it is. If Dion didn't exist, this library wouldn't be what it is. Because these two characters hit it off like you wouldn't believe. And they inspired each other to do all kinds of craziness, like puppies that are too big for their feet, they get rolling, and then like next thing you know, they fall over each other. That's kind of what went on. I love some of the things that they suggested we do. First of all, we went from being a library and cultural center to this great complex of ideas. We had all kinds of things. We were going to have shops, and we were going to have artists and displays. We were going to have museums. And they just kept going. The yellow letter over there says, it seems that people really like to have casual gathering spaces. So we need a room like that. We could have Davenports. We could put mattresses on the floor. Now, when you get over here to this next letter, more of the same, my personal favorite. They'd been criticized for how far the parking lot was expected to be from the actual library. So their solution, people mover. That's the last one. We're going to have people mover. You don't have to go to Disneyland. You just come to the library and ride that thing, right? Have a good old time. And they also considered technology. It's kind of fun. You see things like Flexo-Writer. I have no idea what that is. I don't have a clue. A lot of old-fashioned things that, yeah, we know. But my absolute favorite, they wanted to make sure holography was considered because we're going to have holographs in the library, right? We don't know why. We don't know what they're going to use them for, but we were going to consider holography. And so as their ideas grew, again, over and over and over, they started with, well, here's the basic footprint of the library, and there's rooms, of course, that really aren't there or they're used for something else. Then they expanded. So we're going to have a complex. It's going to be bigger than the library. And we're going to have all kinds of cool things, right? At one point, they wanted to have a zoo, okay? And finally, this is the best picture I can get of this, but I can't not show it. Some of the things we were going to have, a biodome, an observatory, a whole bunch of artisan shops where you could go and learn leatherworking and glass blowing and all of this stuff, right? And it went on and on and on and on in that vein. And they just were amok. They were just having a ball with this. And then reality dealt us a crushing blow. In the early 70s, the city, like much of our country, was pretty awash with money. So we were building this new library and a new park, and we were building City Hall at the same time, and all of a sudden, oh no. Money, no. So all these grandiose ideas were cut very short, and they were told, no, we're going to dial this back a bit, which is not terribly surprising. They go on, and they actually break ground for this, October 28, 1972, so they're moving on. One of the things I hope you'll take a moment to look at in the C&D room is I find in the basement in a drawer in an empty file cabinet, something's rattling around. I look at it, it's a glass bottle, and on it is taped dirt from the first shovelful of the groundbreaking. So that's there. Make sure you stop and look at my bottle of dirt. That's pretty important stuff. And I also had to use the picture of the crowd because if you'll notice, we have a gentleman there, and he's wearing striped pants and star shoes. So we're heading up to the bicentennial. It's only 1972. We're not there yet, but this guy's in the spirit. So since we're coming up on their 250th next year, I thought, hey, that's what we all need, striped pants and starry shoes. We don't know who this kid is, but we do have that model, and we do have it in C&D room, so you can take a close look at it. There's a few things about it that will surprise you. One is to do with technology. Another is to do with a wing that never got built, and you'll find out why in a bit. And they start digging holes. They start terraforming this previously dreadful barren landscape, and here comes the concrete. We found out tonight, fascinating thing, that Councilman Butch Twining is actually library royalty. Because in the process of doing all of this concrete and pours and measures, and he was saying tens of thousands of cubic feet of concrete went into this, it all had to be tested. And guess who tested it? Twining Labs. So I've got some more papers to show him. This is pretty cool. I have to give Ashley the credit for noticing that. To me, I'm just looking at a bunch of stacks of concrete pour receipts. And she goes, hey, I wonder if that's the same Twining. Texted him, and lo and behold. So that's pretty cool. So you can see here they're digging holes for interior fountains. They're starting to put pillars up. The pillars actually were cast using wooden forms. They were made out of commonly available lumber, 2x4s, 6x8s, whatever. And that's why they look as they do today. So when you're out looking at any of our pillars in the library, that's how they came about. The smaller ones were cast in place. They dig a hole, they prop up a thing, and they pour it. The big ones, they had to cast off-site because they were just too big to deal with. And so they would actually stop the street, and these big giant trucks with big long trailers would come down the street, and everybody would stop and look, and here they go with this gigantic gigantic pillar. And then they'd get over here, and this giant crane would lift it up and then plunk it where it was going to go. And a whole bunch of guys would swarm it and bolt it down and take care of it that way. And little by little, we have very few color shots, so I like to use the ones I do. Mostly black and white was the thing of the day, and especially that's what the city used, because I'm sure it was a lot cheaper than color. Here is the walk around, right, our ramp. When the building was first built, that was on the outside. That wasn't inside, it was outside. I really got a lot of kids on bicycles and roller skates, and I'm surprised I have not heard of any, bad accidents, but there must have been at least a few. And it would get wet, and then you'd slip on the thing and go sliding to the bottom. It's all covered in little penny tiles. And that was cast in place. I love this shot. It's one of the few aerials we have, but it really shows you the role of water. As we think about water today, we look outside and we're just so excited that our fountains are being worked on. I know Pat's still with us from council, but there's a lot of people here really want to thank our council for putting the fountains first and helping us with that. So important to us. This gives you an idea. This is what Talbot Lake was, right? So there's our library, and look at this water, right? And we found out doing the Shipley Nature Center anniversary from last month, its 30th anniversary, we found out that this water actually was fed by some underground creeks, one famous one being Freeman Creek. And it would pop up across where Shipley is now, and there were these weird fish that had never evolved because they lived underground, so they didn't have any eyeballs. And people thought it was a joke. So people would go down with mason jars and scoop them up and show them to people. You're from back east? I got an eyeless fish. And that was quite a draw. But you can see how truly overwhelmed we were with that water and how important it was. Another wonderful aerial. You can see Dion's ideas. That's the turnaround that we still have. And of course, the mold is there for the spiral ramp. And here we are getting to completion. Here we are working on that ramp. I love it. You can just imagine that vantage point. Those were always supposed to be fountains. That was the original plan, those bowls. But it turned out for a while they had to put plants in them because when you were walking up that ramp and the wind was blowing, the water would get you. The water would make the walk slippery. I mean, it was a real hazard. So for a little while, it was plants. Inside of the library, this is our amphitheater. Some of you who were kids here might remember that and be able to tell us where that is today. I love this. These are the guys climbing so high to put our soaring curtain walls up. Those massive curtain walls of glass. They are not structural. They don't support anything, which is why we can call them a curtain wall. But there they are. And that looks like a terribly perilous job to me. So again, here we are. You can see more of the construction. And so it's really time, I think, to stop for a second and tell you about a really important guy. Because we know about Neutra, right? We know about him. And we know about Walter Johnson. And we know about a guy named Horn who was the superintendent of the project. And what we don't know is that nobody liked each other and they fought like dogs and cats. At one point, it got so bad, they were going to fire Dion Neutra. And they gave a lot of reasons for it, including the fact that his architectural drawings were overly complicated and bizarre, and having stared at a number of them, they are. You don't know what that's supposed to be. He would come up with mythical symbols for things that didn't mean anything. It's either an art piece or a rock, we don't know. Sometimes it's a person, you don't know. And so they hire an intermediate guy. This guy is Ernest Hernandez Elwood. He'd actually gone to USC with Dion, so Dion knew him. He was known as a very sensible architect, and they put him in place because he could talk to both sides. He could deal with Dion and he could deal with the city. They retained him for $3,500 a month for 6 months, and he stayed considerably longer and pretty much saved the day. So without him, we would not have the library we have today. So I want to thank him. Interesting fact about him, he was actually the first adult adoption in the state of California when that was made illegal. When he came home from the Second World War, he wanted to take writing classes. And so he boarded with a lady, a number of the veterans did, in a boarding house. And they got along so well, she eventually adopted him. So Ernest Hernandez became Ernest Hernandez Elwood, and he was very close to her until she died. He lived in Seal Beach, by the way, and only I think 5 years or so ago passed away. His next important work, if you want to go see something, is one of the buildings at Caltech. He was not a terribly prolific individual architect, but he worked on a lot of teams. So here we go. The day has finally come. We built this thing. So now it's time for the city to accept it, right? They have to walk in and accept it and say, yeah, yay, verily, nothing leaks, this works. And so here they come, and they're all walking up the ramp from the outside, right? That's wonderful. And then they all come in and they meet, and I love this color picture because it shows you those wonderful colors. I remember those colors. I remember when those colors were cool, right? Pretty amazing, and there they all are. One of the reasons I love about this is that on that same day, which was February the 14th, okay, Valentine's Day, they also went over and dedicated the Rogers Senior Center, which is now torn down. And it, I guess, was really quite a long day because the photograph I have of all of them, the only one who's still awake is El Cohen. Everybody else is this. I mean, Norma Gibbs, I mean, she's like holding onto her chair, and I thought that's hilarious. But they start off, I mean, what a big day, right? So Dion Neutra is handing the key to El Cohen. Have a key. Now it's yours. Well, we didn't have any money. We didn't even have money for a party. So they asked the Friends of the Library group, who was actually older than the library itself, and they formed in order to raise money to help the library, if they would sponsor a party. And I know Dina knows a lot about this particular party. And so the Friends of the Library agreed. And so they get all the city's hoi polloi that come, and they have this Huntington Beach High School band is playing. They've got a chocolate fountain, okay? I love all these ladies walking around in mink stoles, right? When was the last time you saw a mink stole, right, in Southern California? And the bouffant hairdos. I mean, it was really exciting with the band. And of course, they try to keep them all corralled, right, with the music and the chocolate fountain. And it doesn't work. They take off, they all go rogue. They're going up all the steps, they're going all the back rooms, they're looking in all the closets. And it suddenly hits them. There's no books on these shelves. What's with that? Well, it turned out that, Walter had been given a pretty meager book budget, but the city by this time was so cheap that he actually asked if he could have money for a coffee percolator. And they said, no, you want a coffee percolator, you want the kind of frivolous stuff, take it out of your book budget. Can you imagine? I mean, that poor that we couldn't afford a coffee percolator? So needless to say, how did we get our books? Well, an awful lot of the books we started out with were discards from the Santiago library system with which we originally affiliated. They had a lot of dupes, they had things they were throwing out. We were only too glad to get them. And so we did get a lot of those. But we also had a lot of grassroots effort. Another library shelf. Here we go. This is our wonderful post-133 American Legion that our library works with today, serves with today is a better way of putting it. And they actually had a book drive. And they were collecting books right and left, and any dupes they had, they took over to the VA hospital. So they really worked very, very diligently. The Friends of the Library, well, they had used book sales. They still do, right? And they still make a lot of money to donate to the library. But there wasn't a library to donate them, to work in. So they would go around, women with, station wagons and cardboard boxes full of books, and they'd set up shop in parking lots. Supermarket would let them set up shop, that's where they set up shop. If it was a school event, there they were. They got, here's the PTA, here's the photo with their used books. So we have all kinds of pictures like this of them just doing that, and that's pretty much the beginning of our books. Rather famously, Norma Brandel Gibbs, who was our first female mayor, didn't get along really well with some other members of the council. And so she actually is very famous for saying that she would give her entire library to her entire personal library to our library, and then turned to this other city councilman and said, if you would give your book, that would be nice. So I just love that story, and I think it's on film somewhere. So there we go. So now we're going to open the library, right? This is big doings. We're going to open the library. Well, by now, look at how far our fortunes have fallen, right? We had a groundbreaking with a band and a guy with striped pants and starred shoes. And now we have a mayor and a podium with 2 junipers still in their pots from the city yard. And there's a cactus. They wrapped tinfoil. It's also from the side. They wrapped tinfoil around that. So that's real festive, right? And I always look and wonder if that's the contested coffee pot. That kind of makes you wonder. So here we are. This beautiful outdoor space. We haven't added onto it yet. Over to the left, you see our fountains. You see our wonderful exterior walkway. And it took no time at all for the world to discover this beautiful place. This was a feature that was put out almost immediately after the library opened from an Italian magazine, very well known in Europe, called L'Architettura. There's another magazine with a really similar name that was like a Mussolini publication, so you want to make sure which one you look at. And they came out and did these incredible photographs. And I love this because you can really see this relationship between the library and light. Remember biorealism? We want to be part of nature, not just look good in it. So here is nature, we're reflecting nature back, right? Here's the water, here's the light, and look at that picture of the fountains on the end. Isn't that gorgeous? The way they're lit and the way they're going. And I hope, that's something we can look forward to again. Color photos, again, are extremely unusual. Here we go. That yellow carpet, unfortunately, was shag carpet. And it turns out that in the 70s, whatever camera technology our public information office was using didn't deal well with shag carpeting and never actually focused. So whenever you got a picture of somebody with shag carpeting, they're always like sitting in this mushy layer of something. And you go, oh, shag carpeting. Here we have that was the horseshoe thing. I showed you a picture of it. It was under construction. Does anybody know where that is today? Yes. You're a ringer.
It's genealogy today. It's filled in, leveled off, so genealogy is there for the shelter.
Did you all hear that? Yeah, it's in Julie, honestly. Yeah, you'd be surprised how many people we give tours of the library periodically. We try to do it once a quarter to groups that come in, and you'd be surprised how many people want to know where it is because they remember it, right? And they remember having been read to there as a child. They don't remember exactly where it was, but there's somewhere, And I've actually had people stomping over there. What are you doing? I'm looking for the horseshoe. Like, okay, who knows? This is a fun picture I really love. And getting back to this biorealism, this idea that you want nature within and without. And Dion was really, really just so focused on that. And he wanted to make sure we had plants inside to mirror the fact that we have this lovely plants outside. And so he actually went, and also the water, the fountains inside and the water outside, he actually went to the extremes of commissioning a research report to identify the exact right mix so that you would have the appropriate humidity to make the plants flourish, but not make the books mold. So that is an incredible attention to detail. This is, if you walk to the back corner of our library, we have 2 fiddle leaf figs. They start in the ground and they reach all the way to the ceiling. They've twice been capped because they're doing damage to the ceiling and trying to go through it. And I think we're about ready for one of them to get its comeuppance again. But this picture on the left, if you look really closely past that indoor fountain, you'll see a whole lot of little teeny pots. Those are the plants being delivered, and the 2 on this end are those fiddle leaf figs. They came to us in little 1-gallon cans. We recently found the plant list, for those of you that are into this, what was actually chosen to be planted inside the library. The unfortunate name of the company that did this was the Sharecroppers. So we probably would be looking askance at somebody with that business title today. But they did a good job, right? Our plants are beautiful. So talk about technology again. I want to bring this circle back to this. We talked about the flexowriter and holography and people movers, but Dion Neutra had a very specific vision, and he really believed, I think in a very prescient manner, that knowledge was going to be shared around the world instantly and quickly. And how he thought that was going to happen is with microwaves and a microwave relay tower. So he created this plan. This is a really good drawing of the building at the time. And you'll see the microwave relay towers, that tall spike on the end, didn't get built. But it's on the model, so when you go out to C&D room and you see the model, you'll see that. The interior components of that was, he said, if you're going to dial up somebody in Tokyo, you better know if they're awake. So lo and behold, that series of clocks, you'll all see about what we now call our slat wall. That was part of that. It showed you different times all over the world. We still have that. This picture here, very hard, but there's a phone booth. There was also much touted a part of this whole system was there was going to be a soundproof booth that you could go in and request your information from Tokyo, right? And you're going to dial up and relay and this would go. And unfortunately, people, when it was just a phone booth, people really thought it was soundproof. And there are amazing stories that I've heard from long retired librarians about some of the incredible conversations they overheard, as did everybody else in the library. So that was an odd thing. That's gone. So we don't have that anymore. We don't have the microwave relay tower, but we do have the clocks. Just a couple people to talk to you about really quickly. This is Richard Armour. He was our bicentennial poet emeritus, or what's it called? We were, as most of you know, in 75, we were declared the official bicentennial city and parade for 76 of all of California. And so he was commissioned to come in and write poems for us. And he was a humorist and a satirist. At one point, he wrote a book about the history of libraries and librarians called The Happy Booker. That was never in our collection, although some of his other books were. And he writes this incredible poem, and it's a lot of fun. There's one line in here about the Huntingtons. Of course, it's completely facetious. And he said the Huntingtons came and they liked the looks of people who looked like they liked to read books. And he would go around and quote all these things. Somebody else I thought was kind of fun. We had all kinds of dignitaries, and we can talk about them. They're so what. This guy, I love this guy. This is Emilio Delgado. Some of you who are maybe of an age will remember him as Mr. Fix-It on Sesame Street. Very, very beloved character. And he came and brought our very first Spanish language album. We had actually LPs you could check out at the time, Sésame Mucho. He was an instant crowd favorite, and so he stayed and read and read and read to the kids. So he was just a really wonderful guy, and people loved him. My next favorite, Dewey the Rooster. Love Dewey the Rooster. When the library opened, remember, this had all been farmland, right? There's still farms and things around there. Library opens, and here's this rooster who shows up. And he pecks at the door. And everybody's thinking, well, he's pecking at his reflection. He'll eventually knock himself silly and go away. No, he got in. He would roost in the Shakespeare section. I don't know where the Shakespeare section is or was then, but that's very documented. That was Dewey's spot, right? So he would do that. And so finally the librarians just gave up. They said, he was here long before we were let the rooster in. He's not really doing harm, and who cares about the Shakespeare section anyway? So there he goes. They actually named an award for the librarians that was given away for years after he flew the coop. It was never heard from again. And it was the Dewey Award. And it's kind of funny because some of the librarians called him Melville. We talked about this earlier tonight. Some of the other librarians called him Dewey. And stupid me, I'm thinking, why is that? And Jessica back there said, well, I was going to tell you, but I didn't want to embarrass you. And then it hits me, oh my God, Melville Dewey, the inventor of the Dewey Decimal System. Thank you. So, we all have those moments. That was mine. But that's Dewey. Big part of our library still to this day is we're a cultural resource center. And we took art very seriously. We still have our exhibit space. A lot of our local artists have their work out. I urge you always to look at that. We started off actually with an artist in residence position. This is an artist named Pastorius. He never gained any real big fame, but he did mess around with metal art, and he created this thing. They would periodically have artists display things in the middle of the turnaround. Can you imagine that? You go through, hit one of these things, what do? This is a giant piece of welded iron, and it was called fluid, I mean, make it out of glass, fine, but iron, it's fluid. So that was him, and that's Walter Johnson. He was just loved art. Here we have a whole series called the Nothing series. And these two lovely people are a folk band called the Honeybees. That was spread off all down the side of the library. And then this is a maquette for what we call the Dancing Lady. Many of you might remember her from the parking lot. She doesn't have any arms anymore. Somebody stole her arms because back in the era of stealing metal to recycle it and make a buck. So her arms are all gone. But she was designed by a lady named Margaret Inez Owings, who won as a first prize that we gave out. She went to Cal State Long Beach and was, I think, probably in her 50s when she went back to graduate school. And then there's this. Isn't that wonderful? I may or may not be responsible for people calling it osteoporosis. Walter Johnson built that. And he made a box, which he unfortunately called a casket. He filled it full of balloons. Then he poured plaster of Paris in it, popped the walls off the casket, popped all the balloons, painted the whole thing white, and gave it to Norma Randall Gibbs, our first woman mayor, great benefactor of our library. And she had it in her atrium. I'm sure she treasured it. When she passed, she bequeathed this to the library. So we have it now. It's upstairs in the little room over in the corner there that overlooks the used books. It's quite enormous. It's about 8 feet tall. Right now we have it bungee corded to a safety rail because we don't quite know how to keep it safe, but there it is. So I do encourage you to go have a look at that. I don't think there's another one anywhere else. And then nearing the very last thing I want to share with you is I've always had this theory that Dion Neutra was deliberately trying to soften the square and harsh angles of the building with circles. And we see that with the turnaround. We see that with the stairway, right? But then I found this picture, and you see this other circle fenced in blue, okay? And I thought, what in the heck is that? Well, I found out that it was our literary heritage garden. And it was founded, the brainchild of this lovely lady, Schey who was an active member of the American Association of University Women. She was actually at one time a president of our Friends of the Library. And she determined that she would take that circle and create, not necessarily a maze, but kind of a maze, and fill it from plants and flowers that are represented in the history of literature. Right? There's Shakespearean stuff, there's Arabic roses, there's all kinds of wonderful things. You can see here people celebrating her and the library. Really, really wonderful spot. This picture is obviously really early because you can see the story is fluid. It's still sitting in the middle and it didn't stay there for long. But unfortunately, we needed to expand. When we built the original library, it was 73,000 square feet, was not enough. So we needed to expand, and the only way to expand was to add the wing that you're in now. Unfortunately, under our feet is the literary garden. So that's gone. We no longer have that. It was a rose garden for a little while, but that was that. Mrs. Cairns actually went on to have a really important career. She studied landscape architecture and went on to design the herb garden at what I call the other pesky Huntington Library in Santa Marina. She wrote a book, very well-regarded book, and I'll tell you, I gave a talk on this spur of the moment to the AAUW, and I was stunned. I mean, I had all these women coming up to me, telling me stuff about Shirley and the whole thing, and Mr. Cairns was very gracious enough to loan me photographs and images. We have more to show in C&D. Well, the story of the expansion isn't all bad because we got this character out of it. This is Rita. We frequently call her a sea serpent, a dinosaur, but she's actually a sea serpent. And she was our mascot. And her name, Rita, R-E-A-D-A, is a play on that. And she goes all over. There was a kid that used to, one of our younger librarians, there was a costume, and he would wear this darn thing. I can't imagine how hot it was, life size, and read to the kids as Rita, right? Now, I keep hoping that someday we're going to find that thing in the closet, because you never know, right? You know, it'll pop out. We also had the Rita, the existing Rita, three-dimensional version over here. She was actually at one point in a big glass case, and people would throw money over the top, and pelt her with coins or whatever, and they were raising money that way. And today, I take her with me when I go to archives, conferences, and history things. If I'm going to be talking about the city or the library, I take Rita, because she's a big draw, right? The gal on the left, everyone wants their picture taken with. The gal on the left is one of the archivists for the county public library. The gal on the right is the executive director of the Heritage Museum of Orange County. And Rita has a good time. She's a bit of a flirt. When she goes places, she sends emails to all the library staff and tells them what she's been doing. Her last big snit was she was at an archives conference in Irvine at the Tustin, at the big air hangar. And they have a carousel, and she wasn't tall enough to ride. So that was quite a crisis. So here we are today. This is the library we have, and we started off with where did we go. So I just kind of want to close with a couple thoughts of who we are today. I don't know how many card holders we have, but I'm sure it's 5,000 or so. It was 4,000 the last time I knew. I think there's probably, I don't even know how many million items we have of all kinds, and not counting online databases and all kinds of other ways that we serve our patrons. But we also have two things that are really specific. One is our literacy center. I had the privilege of getting to know a lot more about them recently. Imagine how better off we are as a community when our community members know how to fill out a job application, help their kids with their homework, right? And people wind up without these skills for a whole lot of reasons. A lot of reasons were surprising to me. But they're there to help, and they meet people where they are, and they help them learn. The other thing they do, it's really wonderful, is they have citizenship classes. If you want to learn the laws and the Constitution of this country, come and take those classes. And I'm a naturalized citizen. I know how much I value my citizenship, so I really value what they do. Another thing I want to talk to you about is the Veterans Resource Center that we have. The library actually opened that, and we didn't have a connection with the military community. Librarian Stephanie Beveridge at the time saw there was a grant and said, there's a need for this. There's a need to have veterans outreach. There's a need to answer their questions and have them help. So she got the grant, and then we reached out to Huntington Beach Post 133 again. Remember, they're working to get us books, and they staff that to this day. Our own post, I have to give them a shout out because I love them. They are one of the oldest continuously serving posts in the entire United States. Our post 133 is only 2 months younger than the American Legion itself. That's a ridiculous feat. Yay, 153. And the other thing I think is really fun and kind of important to hear is that the very last count that I was informed of, Huntington Beach is home to the largest concentration of veterans per capita in all of Orange County. I also asked Marissa for some information she gladly gave me about, the kinds of services we do and the kinds of teams of people here that are involved. And we have, a team that works together on youth services and coming up with programming, a team that works together on adult programming, a team that works on technology, a team that works on security so people know that they're safe when they come here, right? This is a good place to come and bring your kids. All these wonderful, wonderful things. And then, of course, we have our continued support organizations. There's a foundation for the literacy group. We have our Friends of the Children's Library. I see one right there. And probably more than one in the crowd. And, of course, the Friends of the Library. So that's where we are today. I've lost my clicker. And there we go. That's how I always end, because I just love this guy. I know who he is, but I'm not supposed to tell. And again, with the great sneakers. There's something about guys in sneakers in this town. And Hawaiian shirts. It's okay.
How it was developed. Like I used to come here just to take everything for granted, all the plants and, everything. I just loved it. It was so fun.
The roundness of it and the curves, that's how everything is in environment, is everything moves around.
Kathie, she was great. She brought reality to what happened to history.
It's amazing the changes that have happened over the past 50 years.